Welcome, Miss Shirley. You got it?
Riaz, for other people, what is the link for them to watch this?
Okay, for the other people, it is as the YouTube link that is working now, www.bit.ly/alquds/YYC, all capital.
So the one that was on the poster.
Yes.
Riaz, okay. For other people, what is the link for them to watch this?
That's for the other people, it is as the YouTube link that's working now, www.bit.ly/alquds/YYC, all capital.
So the one that was on the poster.
Yes.
Riaz, for other people, what is the link for them to watch this?
That's for the other people, it is as the YouTube link that's working now, www. Okay, these. And if you but in 2 minutes we will start, Aziz.
Sounds good, inshallah.
तो लिंक जूम का मैंने भेज दिया ना आपको। हाँ, व्हाट्सएप पे भेजा था, मैं भी भेज देता हूँ फिर से। I think we should turn the microphone off.
Assalamu alaikum, how are you?
Is this going to be taped, Hazi? Somebody?
Yeah,
Is
it's going to be recorded, so I believe they'll have the recording saved. Yeah,
Okay, great. Thanks.
definitely.
Aziz, Bismillah, you can start now.
Okay, perfect, inshallah. You're good to go? Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. Assalamu alaikum, and peace be upon all of you. My name is Aziz Raj, and I'll be your host and MC for this year's Al-Quds virtual protest, organized by Voice of Oppressed Calgary. First of all, I'd like to thank all of the speakers and panelists who've taken the time out of their busy schedules to join us for this cause. I'd also like to thank all of our viewers for joining us today in raising their voice against the oppressors. Like last year, Al-Quds Day is being held virtually due to COVID-19. But if anything, it is a reminder that no matter what the situation is, it will not be a reason for us to stop protesting the Zionist regime and the Zionist ideology. This year, we've also been lucky enough to have a diverse range of panelists, many of whom are regular attendees of our Quds Day protest, and I'm looking forward to their enlightening speeches. The Day of Al-Quds is an annual international event that is held to express solidarity with the Palestinian people and against the ongoing oppression, illegal colonization, and occupation done by the Zionist regime of Israel. It is a day of resistance, rejection, and a day of raising our voices against oppression and injustice. The Day of Quds is held on the last Friday of Ramadan, which this year has fallen today on May 7th. The Day of Quds is not exclusively for Palestine, nor is it exclusively for Palestinians. It is a cause for every revolutionary and every individual with a conscience to stand up against the oppressor of his or her time. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone to please keep themselves on mute unless it is your turn to present, and I will introduce the speakers in turn. And just a gentle reminder so that we can end in a timely fashion, we would request that all the speakers stay within their 5 to 7 minute allocated time, inshallah. So without further ado, let's begin. I'd like to request Master Afif Hassan to begin with the recitation of the Holy Quran.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, and peace be upon you. So in order to start the program, today I'll be reciting a few verses from the 23rd chapter of the Holy Quran, Surah Al-Mu'minun, which is the chapter of the believers. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قد أفلح المؤمنون الذين هم في صلاتهم خاشعون والذين هم عن اللغو معرضون والذين هم للزكاة فاعلون والذين هم لفروجهم حافظون إلا على أزواجهم أو ما ملكت أيمانهم إلا على أزواجهم أو ما ملكت أيمانهم فإنهم غير ملومين فمن ابتغى وراء ذلك فأولئك هم العادون والذين هم لأماناتهم وعهدهم راعون والذين هم على صلواتهم يحافظون أولئك هم الوارثون الذين يرثون الفردوس هم فيها خالدون والذين هم على صلواتهم يحافظون أولئك هم الوارثون الذين يرثون الفردوس هم فيها خالدون صدق الله العلي العظيم. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. Successful indeed are the believers, they who are during their prayer humbly intent, and those who turn away from ill speech, and those who are observant of zakah, those who guard their chastity, except with their wives or their bond women in their possession, for then they are free from blame. But whoever seeks beyond that are the transgressors. The believers also are those who are true to their trusts and covenants, and those who are properly observant of their prayers. These are the ones who will be awarded paradise as their own. They will be there forever. Sadaqallahu al-aliyyul azim.
Jazakallah. Thank you so much, Master Fee, for that beautiful recitation. Today, defending Palestine is a matter of defending the truth. And yes, the truth includes the cause of Palestine and fighting the Zionist regime, but it also means opposing and fighting oppression in any form and any place that it exists. I'd like to request our first speaker, Brother Arshad Hussain, who is a local Kashmiri activist in Calgary. Arshad, if you would like to unmute yourself and you can begin, inshallah.
Thank you very much for organizing today's this virtual conference about the Palestine. Actually, honestly, I would say that for all this suffering of Palestine, whether it is in the hands of Israel or in Kashmir or wherever, I have to blame myself. I have to blame those Arab rulers, those all Islamic countries. Those are silent and actually helping Israel or India to continue all these inhuman treatments of Palestinian and Kashmiris. So if there is anything what we can do is to force those Arab rulers to come up with a plan, a strategy to counter Israeli brutality and Indian brutality, to stand with the innocent Palestinian. Those are suffering for the last almost 75 years. And all they want is their piece of land, which was belonged to them and was captured by Israel. So let's pray during this holy month of Ramadan. Today, it was the last Friday of Ramadan, that the suffering of our people, the suffering of innocent people, whether they belong to Palestine, Kashmir, US, wherever they are suffering by the hands of this cruel regime, it will end. Thank you very much. Cannot hear you.
Oh, thank you, Brother Arshad. Sorry about that. Thank you, Brother Arshad, for the speech, and definitely, with our continued support, and we'll continue to raise our voices until all oppression has been ended, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Next, I'd like to request our next speaker, Brother Safdar Shuja, who is the current president of the Husseini Association of Calgary, to deliver his speech.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First of all, I welcome all brothers and sisters in today's virtual protest. And thank you, organizers, for having me to speak on this day. Thanks for providing me an opportunity. So today is the day we mark to observe Day of Al-Quds to show our solidarity with the people of Palestine. We want to let our brothers and sisters that we are standing with them and will remain supporting till the freedom of Palestine. As brother mentioned, it's been more than 73 or 75 years. In Palestine, Israel has been forcing discriminatory restrictions on the citizen of Palestine. These Zionist forces have been killing innocent people brutally. They have been limiting education, economic opportunity, and medical care, clean water and electricity for 2 million Palestine. 80% of Gaza's population depend on humanitarian aid. This has been going on for more than 73 years constantly. Palestinians don't have basic human needs because of Israelis. Palestinians is a land of Muslims, Jewish, and Christians. Set aside religion, they are human. They have facilitated the transfers of Israeli citizens to settlement in the occupied West Bank. This is an illegal practice under international humanitarian law. According to Gaza's health ministry, they have injured 1,883 with live ammunition during protest and killed many. They are killing innocent people, including children, others, elders, and since many years. They have been oppressing humans, and this must stop now. Recently, there's another propaganda happening where they are putting pressure on Muslim countries to accept Israel so they could undermine Palestinians' efforts of freedom. Inshallah, Muslim Brotherhood, who are standing with Haq, will not accept Zionists till the day of people of Palestine gets freedom. With everything happening in Palestine, we strongly condemn this behavior, and we call out to Israeli government and international communities to put pressure on them and put a stop to this. The only solution which Imam Khomeini, Rahmatullah, had given to the whole Muslim Ummah, which is giving right to people of Palestine, having a free and fair referendum, so people of Palestine, including Muslims, Jewish, and Christians, could live freely in an independent country. At the end, I pray that today's efforts to show our solidarity with our Palestinian brothers and sisters. Thank you one more time again for having me. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you so much, Brother. Given that social media is a huge platform that has connected us globally, there's a lot of potential that can be harnessed, especially for raising awareness and activism. There are several hashtags going around regarding Al-Quds Day this year. Unfortunately, with virtual rallies, sometimes that excitement is lacking that we usually have in person. So inshallah, I really urge you all to use social media as a platform to raise your voice. I invite all of you who are on social media, and our viewers especially, to take a picture of yourselves during this rally with the Palestinian flag and share it on social media with the hashtag #FlyTheFlag. You could also get creative with your pictures, inshallah. And for those in Calgary, we have our own specific hashtag for this day, which is YYC Quds. So that is YYC QUDS, inshallah. Now I would like to invite Kevin Hunter, who's a local anti-war activist that we often see at our rallies, always supporting. Thank you for joining us today, Kevin.
Thanks for having me. I'm really pleased today to join with Voice of the Oppressed and all people of conscience in Calgary to stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people, to salute the Palestinian people and their courage, their resourcefulness, and their steadfast resistance to defend their right to be in the face of the actions of Israel that believes might makes right, that behaves in so many ways that are counter to the norms of behavior that are accepted by all of the international laws that were established after the Second World War, after the defeat of fascism, which said never again. Actions in support of Palestine are all the more important at this time when the Zionists, being aided and abetted by US imperialists and their allies such as Canada, are escalating their violations of international law and their violations of the human rights of the Palestinians as part of an overall program of dispossession and genocide. It was thanks to the unceasing efforts of Palestinians and their supporters that the International Criminal Court announced on the 3rd of March that they will commence an investigation into the situation in Palestine, what they call, including the crimes being committed by the state of Israel. It's a decision that's welcomed by Palestinian people and all justice and peace-loving people in Canada and around the world who have stood together for more than 70 years in defense of the rights of the Palestinian people. It took place going back to 2009, when the Palestinian Authority first sought to become a state party to the International Criminal Court. And it took all of this time, ever since 2009, for things to get that far in the criminal court. But Canada's stand on this important matter is what I want to talk about. Canada's stand is thoroughly despicable. The Foreign Minister, Marc Garneau, said that Canada's position is that it does not recognize a Palestinian state, even after, a non-member observer status, non-member observer state status in the United Nations. Canada still doesn't recognize a Palestinian state and doesn't recognize that it has standing at the International Criminal Court. With a week later, after being prompted by Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau wrote to the International Criminal Court to express Canada's opposition to the decision. And Canada's unprincipled opposition to the just and the legal decision of the court should be opposed by all peace and justice-loving people. This government claims to fight hate and to be against intolerance and to defend human rights, but all of this is being used by the Canadian government to cover up the fact that one of its main priorities has been and continues to be the defense of Israeli Zionism and the criminalization of those defending the rights of Palestinians and others. And this must not pass. It's important for people to inform themselves, to talk to their colleagues, their friends, their neighbors, their families about these issues. Recently in Calgary, there was a motion to pass the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism, which criminalizes all resistance, and we succeeded in blocking that. The crisis globally is bringing out the best and the worst of humanity. And this year, when the people of Palestine mark 72 years of resistance to occupation, Israel's being promoted as a paragon of efficiency with vaccines, how fast and how thoroughly it's vaccinated its people. But you can see that the Zionist reactionaries are using the crisis as a means to further their genocide against the Palestinian people. The narrative that Israel has done so great at vaccinating its population is in utter denial of Israel's brutal and racist treatment of the Palestinian people. As much as the Zionists would like a free hand to commit their crimes, international law imposes obligations on an occupying power, which includes ensuring that the people under occupation receive vaccinations. The differential access to healthcare is morally reprehensible. It's unacceptable, it's unjust, and it's cruel. But what's decisive in addressing this situation is the resistance of the Palestinian people to the Zionist stand and their ongoing struggle to assert their rights, which will never be extinguished, no matter what. They have the full support of the Canadian people and the peoples of the world who love justice for their just cause and for their national rights, including their right to return. And they will prevail because history is on their side. As Canadians, we need to see that Canada become a factor for peace in the world, and that we withdraw from military alliances with imperialism and establish our own independent foreign policy based on the principles of diplomacy and peaceful resolution of conflicts. Through all of this, on Al-Quds Day 2021, we applaud the heroic resistance of the Palestinian people as they struggle for their sovereignty and the affirmation of their rights, and for the return of all refugees. We stand with Palestine and all those around the world fighting for justice. Long live the just struggle of the Palestinian people.
Thank you so much, Brother Kevin, for that amazing speech. As amazing as our country is, Canada, it is unfortunate the stance that they have taken on the Palestine cause. But with dedicated and amazing activists like yourself, we can work to change that. So thank you so much, brother.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is another local activist of Palestinian origin. She knows all too well what life is like in Gaza, where many of her family and friends still live. Next, I'd like to invite Sister Maha for her speech.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Ramadan Mubarak to those of you who are fasting, and Ramadan Mubarak to those of you who are not as well. So I'm a Palestinian by origin, and I cannot say that I had the honor to be born in Palestine. And I think that honor was robbed because simply my grandparents lived in a city where the occupying Israeli forces decided to take over. I wasn't among the lucky ones who actually lived in the West Bank where they were left the option to live there. No, my city was among those that were taken and made into an occupied land, an Israeli territory. As a result, I lost my grandfather. I've never met him. He died fighting for the land that I so honorably belonged to. My father left when he was 9 years old, and he was left to take care of his siblings. And that, to me, my grandmother was a young 26-year-old who was a widower. Sorry, she was a widow, and she took care of 5 children, who later on became 4 children because one of them passed away. That in its own drew the connections between me and Palestine. I've known Palestine to be not a land because I've never been there. I've never lived there. Palestine to me is a passion. I grew up loving this country. I grew up loving the history of this country. I grew up loving the resistance of this country. And somehow it seeped into my blood, the stories of my grandmother and the stories of what she went through, the stories of what my mom went through when she was 14 years old. Sorry, give me a second. Sorry about that. So those stories managed to create that heritage and that love for that country. When it started, it started as love for the resistance of the people. It started as this anger that grew inside me when I was looking through the pictures of Sabra and Shatila, the massacres that the Palestinians endured, the pictures of their Yassin, where the Palestinians were massacred, mothers and children. And it started as anger because I was so angry that I was forced to live in a different country and my own people are suffering. It also started as a guilt because here's me living a comfortable life and my own people have been suffering. But I was robbed of the right to fight for them as a young person. As I grew older and I became 19 years old and I came to Canada, I had the freedom, believe it or not, in Canada to stand up and say, I'm a Palestinian, I don't believe in what's happening, I'm gonna fight for it. It is so sad to know that after 72 years of occupation, the Palestinian fight is still going on. The Palestinian plight is just as important as the Kashmiri plight, as important as the Sudanese, as important as the Rohingya, as important as every fight that every nation around the world have been through. The only sad part is that the Palestinian ones is a testimony to the lack of empathy around the world. Palestinians are the example of what it means to have two different class citizens. You have people where people would fight for them, the international law will fight for them, the international law will stand by them, and there are those who are less important. And unfortunately, for 72 years, Palestinians have been considered less important, and they're becoming less and less important. And to me, that's saddening, because at one point, Palestinians' right and Palestinian fight was respected, it was endorsed, it was considered a right for humanity. At this time, what I see is that the Palestinian right is no longer considered a fight. Sadly enough, among the Arab countries, sadly enough, among the younger generation of our own people, they don't understand what it means that somebody came into our land, somebody robbed me of the right of living in my homeland. As a Palestinian, when I lived day by day, I decided that I need to take actions, and my actions translated as I grew older and I became more mature from words and from protests to charity. And I get a question all the time saying, for 72 years, we've been giving money to Palestine. For 72 years, we've been raising charity for Palestine. For 72 years, we've been sending money to Palestine. But what people don't understand is that Palestine, the lack of empathy towards the violation of human rights, the violation of international laws, the least we can do to redeem ourselves is to tell the Palestinian people inside Palestine that we can't do much to help you. We can't come and fight with you, but we are thinking of you. We feel for you. We want to be with you. And my reason for joining this time is to remind people that the cause for helping Palestine is still there. The Palestinian people in Gaza and outside Gaza this year need your help. It's not just Gaza. So fighting for human rights, standing for the human rights of Palestinians does not just mean that you vocally speak about it. It means that you put your money, you put your action, you put your efforts where your mouth is, where your words are. So if you leave with anything from here, just remember, I know we can't do much. We can talk, we can tell people, but the best thing you can do is tell those Palestinian peoples who are living in Palestine, remind them, tell them that we have not forgotten about you. We are still supporting you financially. We're supporting you by talking about your plight. We're supporting you by connecting with you. This is the best kind of help to keep this revolution of the Palestinian rights going. Thank you so much for allowing me, and I really appreciate what you guys do every year. I mean, I'm really grateful for what you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sister Maha. Yeah, to all those who might take this Palestine issue lightly or forget how important it is, thankfully we have powerful voices like yourself to remind everyone the urgency and the importance of this issue. And like you said, hopefully we can all turn this this feeling and this voice into action, inshallah. Thank you so much, sister. As long as Palestine remains an open-air prison, and as long as the West Bank remains occupied, and as long as there is humans to bear witness to this genocide and to any oppression in the world, there will be resistance against it. They try to kill us, they try to silence us, but for every person they kill, for every person they silence, 10 more voices will rise, and we will continue and we will never stop fighting. Our next speaker is a research professor at the University of Calgary. She is an author of many books and articles on social justice. Please help me welcome Dr. Shirley Steinberg for her speech.
Thank you, Aziz. Assalamu alaikum and Ramadan Mubarak to those of you that are celebrating. I wish you peace on this Al-Quds Day, this day against oppression, a day I wish didn't have to exist. It's so many years we do this here in Calgary, and so many years it's like being a hamster running around in a bowl, not being able to get out. This Friday before the end of Ramadan is a day which was originally created to create attention specifically to the Palestinians and their plight. And it's important for us to support and be allies to Palestinian sisters and brothers as they are being politically persecuted. and that we seem to be further away from coming to a homeland for Palestinians than we were several years ago. It also is important to understand that anger and violence do not create a peaceful resolution, but it's very hard in these days due to the undue pressure on Palestinian youth and residents who are being harassed, terrorized, and in many situations driven from their homes. Zionism is not only something which occurs in Israel, but that kind of mindset, illegal occupation and persecution, is happening in many countries. We can think of Myanmar, Sudan, the persecution of ethnic Muslims in China, Kashmir, the murder and silencing of Hizmet Muslims in Turkey by Erdogan, and an oppressive regime, the unfair ban of immigrating, of migrating, and refugee Muslims in many parts of the world, and of course, the oppression of other ethnic and religious groups throughout the world. Indeed, it's over 100 million, I think closer to 130 million displaced Muslims in the world today, the largest ethnic group or cultural group of displaced peoples are now Muslims. In 1968, I was a pretty little kid, and I remember a Time magazine cover, which hit me in the head because it came against the way I had been raised and taught. And it was called something like The Plight of the Palestinian Refugee. And there was a little kid in the front with the camps in the background. And I saw those camps, and I learned about it. I found out about it, as a child does. And then I remember 40 years later, for the first time, driving by these structures and asking the person I was driving with, what are they? And they were the same camps. So we have to understand that this incredible global problem is very long and does not, at this point, we do not seem to see an end. And yet we're still paralyzed by unfair decisions that were made after World War II, decisions that were made without understanding the ramifications of ignoring an entire ethnic group and culture of people who belong to be in their home. And actually, persecution and alienation seems to be much worse at this point. We have not progressed. Palestinians deserve a home, and we support the end of oppression and the exiling of Palestinians. As far away as we are, I hope and pray that we can be allies and friends at this time, because they do need to know they are supported. As activists and people who long for peace and equity, we need to understand there's two ways of seeing the world, two words: power and oppression. These both intertwine and unfortunately cannot, or fortunately cannot, live without one another, because you cannot have power without oppression, and you cannot have oppression without power. And so it becomes important as us, when we work with our children and making sure that kids are learning appropriately in school, that they are understanding of how power works, who has power, and how power feeds itself, and to work with those that are oppressed, including ourselves, who are doing work with oppressed people, to come to a space where we can work with people to gain empowerment, self-respect, and peace with who they are. The key, though, is, and this is one of the worst things about this horrible situation in Palestine, is the fact that those who seek to have power, who are oppressed, often duplicate that group in power. And we certainly saw that after the Holocaust, actually, in the land of what is called Israel. We can't just turn a switch and give people more land or more camps or more settlements without giving equal space, rights, voting, university and full educational systems, and legal passage to every single yard and meter in that land. This is what is now called Israel, but it is, of course, a very disputed land, and Palestine is there. These are, of course, words, and we have to talk about how power can be dismantled, as well as oppression when one does not have power. And that problem becomes one of those when those in power seek to oppress others. Thank you, Aziz, for bringing up social media, because that reminds us of an important power today. And we can certainly use this power to support these Palestinian brothers and sisters. And to support Palestine is not to unsupport another group. It is being mindful of social justice and equity, and the fact that every day Palestinians are being harassed, killed, and removed. Kevin mentioned the notion of never again from the Jewish Holocaust 80 years ago. Yet these words about the oppression of Palestinians should be the same. This should be a never again, because this indeed is again for what is happening in Israel. I'll close with really an unfortunate, sad group of words that as a little child was important to me. The words to a song called Exodus. This was a song which was created to discuss the Jewish Holocaust. And they ring in my ears, these words, because these words apply to all people. These words apply to Palestinians. This land is mine. God gave this land to me, this brave and ancient land to me. When the morning sun reveals her hills and plains, I see a land where children can run free. How can these words not belong to Palestinians? Yes, Sister Maha, we have to show and let Palestinians know that we support them. Islamophobia and anti-Semitism are centuries-old hatreds, which are usually perpetrated by dominant cultural countries, which are neither Muslim nor Jewish. Indeed, it was the UK and the United States who basically has corralled us into the mess that the Palestinians find themselves in now. They are the ones who are the majority to use the struggle of Palestinians to create their own British and American economic and political superiority. I don't believe they love the Jews any more than they love the Palestinians. I think both cultures are victims of an unfair partition from the 40s and the continued right-wing and essentialist nature of Zionism. I know that it appears to many people that there is a Jewish side and a Muslim side, but I think it's very important to give homage and send love to those people who have created peace villages in Palestine and Israel areas, to schools all over the occupied lands that insist on having 50% Muslim children and 50% Jewish. Unfortunately, we don't hear of the peaceful attempts between those Jews and those Palestinians. We only hear what the American and British government wants us to hear. I'll close with saying that a coalition of all peoples is essential to bring solidarity with Palestine. And with social media, we can do this. With days like today, we can do this. We can celebrate peace by putting pressure on Israel, the US, the UK, and Canada to support and protect Palestinians. They deserve a home.
Thank you so much, Dr. Steinberg, for reminding us that, the unity and the fact that we're all in this together is important, and we shouldn't fall into the trap of popular media and get divided amongst ourselves. Thank you so much, Doctor. To stand in support of Palestinians is really to realize and be aware of who the oppressed are. We must be educated on such things so that we can identify the truth and we can identify who the real oppressors are. When it comes to Palestine, it is often a litmus test of those who truly stand with justice and with the truth. In the words of Malcolm X, he says, if we are not careful, these articles and this media will have us hating the people who are oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. I would now like to call upon respected Maulana Sayyid Hassan Mushtaba Rizvi, who is a learned religious scholar residing in Toronto. I'd like to invite him to come deliver his speech, inshallah.
I seek refuge from God by the deception and arrogance and jealousy of my lower emotions. And I seek his help in keeping the freedom that I feel in my heart, that I feel free to be able to put my voice against the oppression that I see in the world. It is a blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He has bestowed upon all of you. that your minds and your hearts are not colonized by the worldview that we are here to protest against. The Palestinian people or the oppressed of the world are being oppressed because of a worldview. And I think Dr. Steinberg did mention that. In the worldview that is established today, the animals have more rights than human beings. There are states in the US that are trying to pass laws that an animal cannot be killed, that if it dies on its own, only then you can consume the meat. If all of the Palestinian people that are being oppressed, if just the fact that if they were given the same amount of respect and the same amount of rights as the extinct species of the world, or for what the world is collecting funds for to save, or the Amazon rainforest, it is a very sad state that a human life is now less than the lives of cats and dogs. And in this worldview, as long as this continues, the minds of people are going to be colonized. The land that we are on was taken away from the Inuits, from the native people. Their nations were slaughtered, blood was spilled, their tribes were, basically like gone. There's like, and we established our land, homes on it, and we built a whole system. And now history is sort of forgetting whose land it was. But the spirit and the heart and the minds of the Palestinian people are alive. And no matter what the status quo is, or no matter what the worldview is, they've shown that, for them, freedom is important, even if their children are killed, even if persecution is done. And the worldview that Hitler had is the same worldview now that is governing the world. There is not much of a difference. And Dr. Steinberg mentioned about power and oppression. The true power that is coming from the heart of a human being does not create oppression, but it actually creates justice and fairness. But the power that comes out from a colonized mind, from a place of weakness inside of the human heart, when it comes out of jealousy, when it comes out of greed, when it comes out of arrogance, that is what creates oppression. And that is what creates the injustice. For my sister, who I did not have the honor to be born in her land, you are correct in saying that perhaps the people are slowly not responding to the same way. But there are, for the last 30 years, we have stood in the streets. We have been shouted at. We have been sworn at. In our protests, people have brought dogs. Our women have been hit. We've been standing in a very small place for the last 30 years, for the fact that yourself or anyone from Palestine should not feel this way. And although things seems to be a little bit going in this direction, but I need to understand is that the human spirit is alive, and we will stand with you till this freedom that is supposed to be yours is given. So whatever that we can possibly do, whether it is charity, whether it is coming and speaking the truth. And the way the Zionists work, they work from the place of fear. They try to put fear inside of the hearts of people, and that's why perhaps they get a little bit weaker. The JDL, if you were to go onto their website, they have given myself death threats that, just because of the fact that we we stand against the status quo. There is death threats for me. On their page, there are people who are wanting to know my address. So regardless of whatever happens, we're not going to give up. We're still going to speak out. As far as my brother who came in and mentioned about the Canadian government is just a proxy of that same worldview that exists in the world. It's not anything different. The Saudis out there are the same proxy. The British system that colonized the minds and the hearts of almost the whole world is also part of the same proxy. So this worldview that exists is just separation of the borders, but the worldview is the same. If you were to go to America, if you were to go anywhere else, there are only a few countries that are fighting against this sort of worldview. They are asking that human beings should be given their basic rights. You know, and I'm just giving an example, and there's not much that I can say. If the 2 million people in Palestine were to be looked upon as human beings, there will be not a single person in this world who will not stand up for their rights. This is the saddest part, that in this worldview, they're not looked upon as human beings. The foreign policy that is dictated by the Zionist regime is the same sort of foreign policy that was dictated by all of the oppressors that came before them. In Islam, oppression or batil is something which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way he looks at it, he says that it's not even real. It's just a movement of the water that creates the foam on top of the water. The foam thinks that it's real and it's not. It's there in its own existence, is dissipating. As long as the foam is there, the process is happening that the foam is disappearing slowly, slowly, slowly. So regardless of how much they're going to push, no matter how much they're going to try to colonize the minds, no matter how much they're going to try to push forward this sort of unfairness, that if you were to take, you know, a person unjustly from their home and then come over and take over that person's house and then claim that this is their house, you know, no matter how much injustice and unfairness they do, they were not going to be able to succeed because they're just a deceptive system that is there because of the weakness of people. Your minds have been colonized. If our minds were not colonized, if our hearts were not colonized, if we were truly people that had their humanity saved, we will not be in this situation for over 70 years. You know, Imam Khomeini used to say that if all of these Arabs, they were going to come out of the house and just throw buckets of water, Israel would, the regime of Israel would just drown. This is how weak this regime is. It's only been, you know, shown to be powerful. And their power machine is putting this sort of fear inside of the hearts. One thing from my forefathers that has been, you know, narrated, and it has been given as the last words or will from one to the other. And the will is such that my forefathers used to say that be careful, be afraid of the curse of an oppressed who has no one but God. They used to say you need to be afraid because that voice reaches God, and it is guaranteed that it reaches God. So the people who are there who have no one, who have no support, who have been made into this sort of prison for the last 70 years, their hearts, when they cry, when a mother loses her son, and she has no support from the family, she has no support from the government, she has no support from anyone, her cry reaches God faster than anything, and it is accepted. So my Maulana is going to speak. He's going to tell us a bit more. But my heart is for you, for the Palestinian people. The movement is there. We know it is injustice. We know it is unfair. We know that this false system is just there to dissipate. You have hope. You have courage, and you have strength. You're not weak. Your strength and your courage and your hope exists in your mind and in your heart, and that no one can take away. And the world sees that bullets are thrown, bullets are fired, and in response, youths are coming out, children are coming out and throwing stones. Who is more stronger? The one who has a gun in front of a person who has a stone in their hand? Who is more powerful? The world knows. It's the only thing is that their minds are colonized. So against the status quo, stand up. Let us know what forms that we can do, as if it is charity, if it is any sort of support. The reward of all of this for what you guys are doing, or what anyone is doing, the reward first is for our own selves. That we can say that we came together with whatever resources we had and put a voice against the unfairness that exists. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant you, and you have the worldview of truth, you have the worldview of true justice and true fairness. May God grant you that clarity and that vision for the rest of your lives, and that in our own lives we see that this deceptive system goes away. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.
Jazakallah. Thank you so much, Maulana, for those powerful and moving words. I think it was you who had told us once that, all of us, we're lions, but we think of ourselves as sheep. And, because of the oppressors and the lies we've been told, we almost get paralyzed into not being able to help. So inshallah, with powerful voices like yourselves that can remind us who we really are, we can put an end to oppression, inshallah. Thank you so much. It's been talked about a few times today, that we are here standing up against Zionism, because those who support and endorse the crimes of Zionism are supporting a genocide. And I'd like to make one thing clear that's been echoed with all the speakers, is that, all Kurds and this struggle, it's not an opposition against any of our brothers and sisters in the Jewish faith. And it's not anything against the Jewish faith at all. Rather, this is against an illegitimate state that is unjustly being built by the blood of innocents, men, women, and children. And this is a stand against the oppressive ideology in general. Our last speaker that I'd like to call up for this evening is a respected resident scholar with the Husseini Association of Calgary, Maulana Sayyid Hadi Hassan. Please, Maulana Sayyid Hadi, if you can unmute and we can listen to your speech, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الأطيبين الأنجبين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قال الذين يظنون أنهم ملاقو الله كم من فئة قليلة غلبت فئة كثيرة بإذن الله والله مع الصابرين. What is the point of holding Quds Day every year, especially during the pandemic with this little number of participants? The answer is calls for the prayers, irrespective of the numbers of people who attended. The ringers for the bell of a church, they ring the bell, irrespective of how many people attend the services. So it is in fact our duty to keep standing for those who are oppressed. It doesn't matter how many people join us or how many people neglect us or how many people even oppose us. We are serving the cause of Almighty Allah. We are responding to the call of our conscience. And by standing with the oppressed one, we are proving that our conscience is still alive. And on the day of judgment, when we are held responsible, what did you do against oppressors? And what did you do to support the oppressed? Perhaps our excuse will be accepted before Almighty Allah. But at least we came out of our comfort zone and we opposed the oppressor and we supported the oppressed by raising our voice. Imam Ali, our leader, the vicegerent of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in his deathbed, recommended people, asked people, be the enemy of all the oppressors and be the supporter of all the oppressed ones. Imam did not say, don't support the oppressors. Imam said, be the enemy of the oppressors. Because not supporting the oppressor is not sufficient. Shouting in the face of oppressor is the minimum that we must do. Becoming their enemy, opposing them with all our might, that is what is required for us to be able to practice our faith or our free conscience. In many cases, those who do not support the oppressor but do not oppose the oppressors, they end up in supporting the oppressors. So this is why we are here, and we'll keep coming every year. It doesn't matter how dire the situation is, how many people attend or how many people don't attend. Second point I'd like to make, what is the Quds Day? Those who are sure, Allah Azza wa Jalla says in the Quran, قال الذين يظنون أنهم ملاقو الله كم من فئة قليلة غلبت فئة كثيرة بإذن الله والله مع الصابرين. Those who are sure, they said, those who were sure that they would meet their Lord, Allah Azza wa Jal, their opinion was how often the smaller groups, weaker groups have defeated the greater and more powerful groups by Allah's permission. And Allah is with those who observe patience. So it's the matter of patience, it's the matter of resistance. The victory will be at the doorsteps of Palestinians. Falsehood has greater show off, but truth has the real power. The strength of truth is in God Himself. Quds Day is not only the day of Palestinians, it is the day of all the oppressed people of the globe. It is a day in which the oppressed people shout in the face of oppressors, so they can understand that they cannot advance with their criminal agendas. Quds Day is the day of revival of godly and true humanitarian values. Quds Day is a day in which the humiliated and the weaker people rise against the arrogant. It is day of the fight of nations who have been downtrodden or who have been suppressed by the oppressive regimes. Inshallah, the day will come when justice and peace will rule the world. يَمْلَأُ الْأَرْضَ عَدْلًا وَقِسْطًا بَعْدَمَا مُلِيَتْ ظُلْمًا وَجَوْرًا. We all are waiting for Imam al-Hujjah, the final successor of Prophet Muhammad, along with Jesus Christ, peace be upon him. Imam Mahdi and Jesus Christ will come and will crush the tyranny and corruption forever and remove and wipe out all the suppression from the surface of the earth forever, and will establish peace, justice, love, and affection in the land of Allah Azza wa Jal for all and forever. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much, Maulana Hadi, for those beautiful and powerful words. Like you said, whether we're one person or a million people, we will not sell our resolve to stand with the truth and to stand with justice. And we will, some of you have said you've been fighting for this cause for 70 plus years. And inshallah, we'll fight for the next 70 if that's what it takes, because we will never give in and we will never give up. To participate in the Quds Day and raise our voices against oppression is a moral duty on all of our shoulders. And it is our responsibility to do what is in our capacity for this cause. I have certain friends and even family who don't attend Al-Quds rally or don't think it's very effective, especially virtually. But as we've been taught by our leaders, this is a very good and a very responsible thing to do. And it's a slap in the face of all the oppressors. And it's a step in the path of justice, inshallah. So I'd like to invite Uncle Riaz Khwaja to give his thanks and closing statements. And from my end, I would like to thank all of the panelists and all of the speakers here today, because this shows that the hunt for justice is alive. And when history is made, we will all know that we were on the right side. So inshallah, Brother Riaz, if you want to unmute and you can get your statements, inshallah. Brother, I think you're still muted, Riaz, Uncle.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Our stand against an illegitimate state that's unjustly being built from the spilling of blood of innocent men, women, and children. As we continue to pray and protest for Palestine, let's not forget places like Kashmir, Syria, Bahrain, and Yemen, and anywhere else there may be oppression. The forces of colonialism, racism, and oppression still exist in our world. And the day of Quds is an opportunity to shine light on these issues. As we conclude our virtual rally today, once again, on behalf of myself, on behalf of Voice of Oppressed, I would like to thank Aziz for being an MC and host of this event. I would like to thank all the speakers for their valuable time and enlightened speeches, and a big thank you to all the viewers who joined us despite the unprecedented circumstances. May we see liberated Palestine in our lifetime, and may we witness the fall of Zionist regime. Long live Palestine. Thank you once again. Thank you all. Fi amanillah.
Ilahi Ameen. Ilahi Ameen.